said, "Oh, you want to hear something funny?" And you're like, "Oh, that might be good on the podcast." My brother, not the one you know, my youngest brother, who's a bit of an idiot, and he's probably going to hear this, but I love him dearly. So
I got one of those brothers.
My dad just got a message that said he's in a severe car crash, and I was like, "Is that a real thing? Like, what?" So my brother, who people know, read Curry in our industry, and I started looking it up, and sure enough, there's a feature in iPhone 14 and 14S, I think, that is, if you're in a severe car crash and there's no response, it could be a real thing. And I'm like, is it false positive? Is there, like, are there scams about this? And then we found out what really happened. He left it on top of his car. And then, and so it worked as advertised, but he's fine. So yeah, that's what that
was in an automobile accident. But
I think it's done. So like when we tried to call it, I don't know if he braked and it just shot somewhere, or if it just flew off when he took a corner. But I think he's probably got a new iPhone coming soon.
Yeah,
that's funny.
I won't say his name. He knows who he is, etc. So, yeah, you can
Jason,
look him up.
Thank you for joining us today for this episode of On the Hook. Do you want to do a quick introduction about yourself? Most of our listeners know Sam and I by now, hopefully.
Yeah, sure. No, I was really excited when Jacob mentioned you guys were doing this podcast. I think I invited myself on before Jacob invited me. And then, I realized I'm sort of a fill-in for someone you were hoping to have this week. But
no,
but I don't care. It doesn't bother me.
It's good to have you here.
Happy to sit here and talk about myself. Yeah, so I'll give a real quick sort of potted bio, just because I know it's supposed to be a little bit personal. So I was born in Chicago, but I grew up in upstate New York. I grew up in Binghamton, New York. Shout out Binghamton. One of the lesser known Hamptons. That's
Binghamton.
Yeah.
That was good. I got it.
My father was a professor at Binghamton University for 40 years. And I went away for college. I went to the state of Minnesota. I went to McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota. And then after college, I got into music and playing music. When I was in college, I played the drums and did that for a few years. And maybe we can talk more about that later. But played in bands for about 5 years, and then went to law school at University of Minnesota. Got married to a girl from Minnesota while I was in law school, and then moved to New York City. And I've been in New York City for 22 years or so. 2 kids. My son is about to graduate from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland with a civil engineering degree. I've tried to get him to go into cyber, but
unsuccessfully.
And I have a 19-year-old daughter who is a musician. Maybe we can talk more about that.
Drums as well? Is she into drums?
No, she's a guitar player and a singer and a songwriter. She's far more talented than I ever have been.
By the way, one of the best movies I saw recently, I got back from RSA conference. I was exhausted and I couldn't sleep because California time. I sat in front of I was like, hey, I kind of want to see this movie. It was Whiplash.
Oh, and awesome.
It's amazing. Jacob, have you seen it?
Favorite movie, which tells you, I guess she has a thing for drummers.
It's just such a good movie. Honestly, Jacob, have you seen it?
Is just awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so well that it's an exploration of like passion and just it's such an exploration of human condition. It's amazing. So
I'm going to watch it tonight. I have not seen it.
It's incredible.
I sat down about 11 at night, jet lagged, and having been on the red eye the night before and stuff, and I couldn't stop. It was that good.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Totally agree.
Yeah.
So I went to law school, moved to New York, started my professional career at a big law firm in New York. Had no intention of really staying. No offense to the law firm and my colleagues, but I really didn't have any interest in being a partner at a big law firm. And so it was really just a matter of time before I, looked for my escape, and it kind of fell into my lap about 2 years and change into practicing law. And I ended up jumping over to Kroll. This is in 2002. And I spent my first several years, and this is why they recruited me, is I had experience with e-discovery and helping lawyers use electronic evidence in their cases and stuff like that. So they're hoping I could help them sell e-discovery services to the legal community. And, it was really an interesting and dynamic space at that time. But after a few years became much less interesting and commoditized. And
how long were you there, Jason?
at Kroll, I was there for 11 years.
I'm wondering if we bumped into each other because I was.
Were you at Kroll?
No, I was a computer associates, and we did a lot with Kroll, and including made a product called eTrust 2020, which I'm having flashbacks now, and it was forensics and where physical and digital met and all that stuff. But we worked with both Pinkerton and Kroll at different times.
Do you remember
really? Oh my goodness! There was a dude named Eric. It'll come to me. It's in the medium to long term memory, but you look familiar.
Okay.
But anyway, please continue. This is about you, not that, but like, because I was in New York at the time, and it would have been the right time frame. But continue, yeah.
Yeah, no. So I was in the New York office of Kroll for 11 years, and after a few years in eDiscovery, moved into more forensics. Actually, I was just at the right place at the right time. A leader unexpectedly left, and I took over leadership of our computer forensics practice. And of course, this is mid 2000s. Nobody was using the term cyber anything. You just get laughed at.
Cyber meant something else, right? Like
cyber meant something else.
ASL.
Yeah. So we called it digital investigations. It was computer forensics and digital investigations. And I had a great mentor there who we can talk more about later if we want to, but Alan Brill, who's just sort of one of the forefathers in the business, incredible guy, was a mentor for me there. And so spent 11 years there, and then mainly doing incident response, investigations, and then left because I really wanted to start a more proactive business. And again, this term didn't exist either, but what came to be known as an MDR business, managed detection and response. Assuming the bad guys are already inside and finding them and getting them out.
Or we called it a co-managed SOC in those days, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's exactly right. So really wanted to do that, and this isn't a knock on Kroll. They weren't all that interested at the time. Of course, they've subsequently gotten into it, but at the time they weren't real interested in making that investment. And so I was looking for a place to go and left and went to a company called United Lex with a friend, a guy that I had recruited out of the FBI into Kroll a few years before, Ted Tyson, whom Jacob, from our Matter together. And so Ted and I left together and went over to start a cyber and privacy practice at United Lex. I recruited another friend, and this is a name you might know, Sam, because he was a visiting fellow at the National Security
Institute. Yeah, George, as I am, George. I actually am now a fellow. I guess I got a promotion, but continue.
Yeah, I don't think he's as involved as he was for a while, but his name is Kevin Noble.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We know of each other. Like we see the lists and stuff, missed calls and stuff.
That's what he said as well. So he was at a company called Terramark for many years, and that's where I met.
And I knew Terramark. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Alan Brill introduced us.
Who bought them? Was it Verizon bought them?
Verizon bought them. Yep.
Verizon bought them. Yeah.
Yeah, and that led to Kevin's departure. But anyway, we had this thing. So Terramark. I don't think I'm disclosing anything that's sensitive here, but Terramark had an incident response team that was led by Kevin Noble, and they were kind of the special forces that Kroll would bring in for really intense network intrusion investigations. When we needed some extra, muscle there, we would bring those guys in. So worked some really cool stuff back this is again mid to late 2000s, and so he was one when I went over to start this MDR business, because we talked about doing something like that back at the time. Just didn't come together. And I called him. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm bored." I said, "All right, come on over." So we started this business, at United Lex. And then, probably taking way too long with this story, but it built the business to a certain scale at United Lex, and we're looking to take it to the next level. But we weren't really aligned with the rest of United Lex's business and what they wanted to do. We were sort of a hobby for them rather than, and that's not, again, I'm not criticizing them at all. I probably would have done the same thing. And they very graciously agreed to let us shop the business around. And we brought it to Ankura in 2020. So fully intact, all of our clients, all of our people, all of our gear, everything, it was an asset purchase. We just brought everything over. and we've been operating here at Ankura. So I'm responsible for our managed security services, which does include, supporting incident response. We deploy EDR and hunt the bad guys around, do containment. But most of what I do is, subscription-based, annual contract, MDR services. And then I moonlight as the chief privacy officer at Ankura. Because I got into privacy law very early.
So you've kept this team together through some big sea changes, right? How long has it been one functioning unit?
Since 2015. The core, leadership group has been, continuous since 2015. So
that's remarkable.
I have to say, meeting most of them, I would say they're all really good quality people. Technical prowess aside, I think that's probably one of the reasons they do stick together so well.
And Jacob, this was the group that you interacted with to begin with? Is that how you met Jason, or was it before that?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I don't know if I mentioned this to Jason or why I thought Jason was a good person that I appreciated both personally and professionally, and then we could talk about how we met a little bit. But it's actually a very, very small story, but I think we were sitting there during an incident we both were working, and I'll let Jason tell the story of the incident because my version might be a little different.
Be interesting.
Because you were secretly the villain in this piece, right?
Yes.
That's what I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the reveal.
Well, there were certain things I wasn't allowed to touch because there was suspicion of maybe someone with access was the villain.
I think you look generally suspicious. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's the haircut. So I just got a haircut. I went with the villain haircut for this one.
No more ponytail. You used to have a ponytail. Yeah.
I did used to have a ponytail. That one's gone now. But so Jason and I were sitting there just having coffee, I think, while working an incident. And I noticed, I think it was on your laptop, Jason, there was an EFF sticker. And I asked you about it.
That's right.
I remember that. And we just started talking about digital rights a little bit and what the EFF does and what they stand for. And that we both had donated, small amounts here.
That's funny. I actually forgot. Now I forgot we had that conversation. But that was one of the first.
That wasn't a just strictly professional.
We're in the logs, Jacob. Yeah.
Right. We're at the logs and I'm burning them on the side. So that's how Jason and I met, and we started talking a little bit about that. And just even that little bit of conversation, I was able to sort of glean that Jason was a good person. I kind of respected his ideology and who he was. And then we just got to know each other over doing this incident. We've kept in touch since. So that was, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago now, 6. I don't know how long it's been.
I think, it's got to be 6, maybe even 7 at this point. But we shouldn't be too specific about that.
So it was a period of time
in the before time.
Reverse engineering our timeline. Yeah.
Yeah. When Jason worked at a company that did incident response, and I worked at a company, I don't know which one. It's easy you won't be able to tell based on looking at my LinkedIn or any of the history I have, because there's no way to tie me to what the incident did specifically. But Jason, you want to tell, because I guess you've done a little bit of speaking in an anonymized way about this incident. We can't, to our listeners, we can't disclose anything about this incident.
Now you're going to sound like spies. This is not spy work.
It's not spy work. It's just standard corporate incident response, but it's still
to protect the innocent and the clients.
But we can talk about it conceptually.
It's because it's an incident that never became public, which I always consider a successful.
Until today, that's
but Jacob, and there was a sort of mutual respect right off the bat. I mean, everybody on my team immediately was like, okay, this guy knows what's going on. He's transparent. He doesn't have a huge ego. He's easy.
Well, then I didn't. Now I do.
Now it's just towering ego.
Hopefully, I'm kidding. I don't know.
No, you're not.
But just very responsive and great to work with. And for the record, I have tried to recruit Jacob a couple times, but don't worry.
As have I. We will work again. We'll work together again. It will happen.
Yeah. I still think Jacob and I will find ourselves in the same place eventually. So we got called in to do through the lawyers. That's where a lot of the incident response work that I do is through counsel, through outside counsel. So we were brought in by a law firm, and it wasn't a ransomware incident. In fact, Jacob, if I recall, we never found any malware whatsoever related to this incident. Anyway,
I don't think there's any.
Is this like
evidence?
If a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it? If there's an incident and you never find any malware, did it really happen?
Well, there definitely was an incident. The data
Yeah.
proved that someone had access to things they shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But there was no evidence of it being from exploitation.
Well, and I have to say, like the start of this, and I've had, a handful of incidents over the years start this way, which is the way that the victim finds out they've had an incident is a third party tells them. Now I know it's different. Ransomware is kind of changing, and obviously that's almost cheating in my opinion. This was not a ransomware event, but there was a plain old, good old fashioned extortion.
stupid human tricks. Yep.
That was sent to the senior executives of this company saying, "Hey, I have your data, and provide a little proof of life." And I remember this is also going to be too. I'm not going to be too specific about this because you can trace the time if I said the figure, but I do remember what Bitcoin was trading at the time. And let's say it was still in the triple digits. So that tells you it was quite some time ago. But the ransom, when you did the math, it was, 7-figure, nice, healthy, mid 7-figure extortion demand. But again, that's it. That's all the attacker said. They didn't give any indication of, how they got in or what they got in. So, and there were some other things about the message, it was very well written email, indicated some knowledge of the industry, stuff like that made us immediately think that it was Jacob. No, that it was an insider incident. It had all the markings of an insider incident. And so we did, we worked with law enforcement from the very beginning, with the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office. And it was it was a serious enough allegation that it did get, attention. And anyway, I do consider it sort of my white whale case because we never did figure it out. We never solved it. I like to consider it a success, though, because, again, it didn't go public. And one of the reasons for that is after a period of time, the attacker mysteriously cut off all communications and disappeared, never to be, or at least to this day, has not been heard from again. Now, again, I like to think that it's because, they felt the walls closing in. And some things have come to light since then that I really can't talk about that make me more confident. And I think I told you about that, right, Jacob?
I think we did talk about it, but I think
anyway, so I sleep better. I've convinced myself that I know what happened now, and so I can sleep better.
I think what made it so interesting compared to other incidents too is that usually you show up in an incident, you have some technical evidence, you find a way an attacker got in, typically, right?
Yeah.
Looking at the malware logs, there's usually enough technical evidence with some exceptions. This was a cast of characters, all with different motivations across all the technical people had motivations.
It's like the usual suspects.
It was.
It really was.
The politics and the dynamics of the environment at the time created all this weird, infighting's not the right word, but personal dynamics of people that
personal
wanted
dynamics, like some Game of Thrones stuff going on in the House of Dragons. Yeah, it was very interesting personality wise, and it was like 24/7. I mean, I remember, when we got engaged to do this, it was on a Friday, and we had 7 people on site Sunday morning at 8 a.m.
That's how those things went.
I think people
late, yeah.
A lot of people on the outside.
Sorry, go ahead, Jacob.
I was going to say that a lot of people on the outside of incident response look in, they just see the posts, like a 4-paragraph blog, and like, wow, that's really cool. They found that. During this incident, there's people working 5 days straight, maybe, going through hard drives in basements, trying to figure out if a hard drive had data. It is grueling, dirty work at times. That is not fun. There was no automation that we could do. There is no inventory we had of which assets could have been affected because of certain parameters. I don't want to go into details as well, but essentially we had to go through every laptop in a basement. Fortunately, I didn't have to go through every laptop in a basement, but
we were looking through literally like recycling bins, those giant recycling bins that are like, 4 feet high and 3 feet across, full of decommissioned hard drives.
Yeah. And then NK stuff or like going through the rebuilding. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Back in those days,
Sam?
if you suspected an executive, you would send your team in like after hours or when they left it in a car or in their office, and
you'd
go in through a port and you'd suck everything off the hard drive in a narrow window of time, right? It's
exactly.
That reminds me of a slight side story that I don't know if I'd tell it another time. So it's a good one. It has nothing to do with incident response really, but I was doing a network rebuild for a company that I was interning at. I won't mention the company name either because it is on my LinkedIn. There's several that I was interning at.
Listeners need specifics, man. No.
And the company doesn't exist anymore. But it's just kind of a funny story of like IT work, and maybe it's not that funny that people will find out. So we had to do this VoIP upgrade, and I was doing all this equipment rehaul, and I was doing it for security purposes, so I could put some new security appliances that I was doing. I was tasked. My internship was over the summer rebuild our corporate network. So the company was small enough where they'd have an intern tasked to do that, right? But it was also a big security company. And we were doing this, and we got everything set up, and we're wiring everything in the office so that everyone could come back on Monday and start working again. And we closed the door to this one office. And as we close it, we realized we locked the building keys that we don't usually have access to this office. It's the CFO's office, if I recall correctly. And so we just like look up at the ceiling and be like, you think? And we lift the tiles up. And so the walls didn't continue high enough. So people talking about like physical security and pen testing. And so they just threw me because I was the smallest guy over the wall. And then I got to get the keys and throw them back over the wall again. Or was able to open the office. I can't remember.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Anyways, back to our main story.
No, so that case, it really was like, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit too about my journey, so to speak, but I do not have any formal technical training. I've learned a few things from working with people like Jacob and Kevin Noble and Ted for, 15 years now, but I don't have any technical training. And so really, incidents like this one are the ones that fascinate me the most because it's all about motivations. And, the who is actually less important. Now, in this case, it kind of was important, but in most cases, you guys know attribution is a fool's errand most of the time. But the why is really important, right? What were they trying to do? What might they do with this access? What might they do with these documents is really important. And obviously the how is always important.
Most of this is human conflict, right? Most of it's human motivation and cons and conflict, and the tools don't really matter as much. I mean, yes, they do because they could change the way they interact. But as you were talking, I was wondering, was it a gradual progression to more and more technical? Because for all that you say you're not very technical, you've been exposed to it and soaking in it for such a long time that you're now, you're probably more so than you realize. And you now do privacy. When did you first sort of go, wait a minute, this is what I do now?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I mean, I think those of us who got into this area back when I did in the, certainly mid 2000s, you didn't sort of set out to do it. You just woke up one day and you're like, oh, I guess now, I wish I could pinpoint the day that I first said, I'm in cybersecurity, because if you'd asked me.
Or InfoSec. Yeah.
InfoSec, right. Yeah. InfoSec. It was definitely a gradual thing. And I still have a ton of respect for the technical people that, that do the what I consider the hard stuff, or the stuff that's hard for me, and understand my role in it. I mean, the first time I've spoken at RSA a handful of times. I remember the first time I was petrified. I wasn't even sure I wanted to do it. But I made sure my topic was, so I kind of have made a career of going to technical conferences and talking about legal stuff, and everyone's like, wow. And then I go to legal conferences and I'm a cyber guy, it's like, wow. So, but
all cards, right?
Guys sort of scare me a little bit. But no, but you do, to your point, Sam, you do pick up, you just start speaking the language. I mean, that's really what it is. Even if I can't do the work, I can understand what can be done and what can't be done, and, what the right investigative, what logs we need to make a determination on something, So I still am wary about, I don't, obviously, as I just said, I don't consider myself, certainly not a hacker or any sort of, engineer in any way, shape, or form. But I understand the discipline pretty well, just having been.
Some of the, how when you have somebody who's like part doctor, part lawyer, and they become a coroner, for instance, right? And some of the most brilliant people I've met have people with like engineering and legal background, and they do things like write patents, right? Which is an amazing skill.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out that the mental capacities are similar for things like music, which you did young, and writing and coding and law, right? It's that short-term memory buffer. So you probably had some inherent skills there. That doesn't mean that you can just do it, because Dunning-Kruger comes into play, right? At one end of the spectrum in Dunning-Kruger, you learn a little bit and think you're an expert and don't know what you don't know. But at the other end, you may actually know more than you know. Yeah. Right. I think you're probably at that end now. And you, by the way, everybody suffers imposter syndrome when they're true experts, right? But you probably are sitting in that intersection of those two skill sets. And so you don't feel at home completely in either.
Yeah. But I will say, to your point, sort of false modesty aside, I guess. Yeah. I feel like I can hold my own pretty well in technical conversations. But part of that is knowing when, it's getting over my head and not pretending that I know something I don't, or that I understand a term, or, and knowing to call, somebody like Jacob or somebody like Kevin Noble. Some of those investigative instincts and just, understanding, human motivations and that kind of stuff. That's what I love about this business. Even though I don't do it, actually, I do the perfect amount of instant response now, because it was when I was at Kroll, and it's, the phone would ring 15 times a week with something crazy. It's fun, but
so what is the perfect amount? What is the perfect amount? Is it like, Tuesdays and Thursdays? Is it?
Well, for me, I mean, I am very fortunate, like I said, to be at a place with a lot of great people, so I can kind of, flit in and out a little bit, and, sort of be on the executive briefing calls and, stay out, get updates from the team. But yeah, like, as I mentioned, we have let's talk about Ankura a little bit. We have a large incident response business. We're an approved provider of computer forensic services under virtually all the major cyber insurance policies. So that's where we get a lot of our incident response workers coming in through that insurance channel. And so, at any given time, I think right now we've probably got, 15 to 20 incident response matters going at the firm. I'm certainly not involved in all of them, but my team is involved in a good number of them in a supporting capacity. So we're doing containment, with our EDR.
But you must be at the point where you've made it a process, and so you're highly efficient, and you aren't waiting for the bat phone to ring, or the bat symbol to go off in the middle of the night, sort of thing anymore, right?
Correct. Well, and there, ransom. This is the third time I mentioned ransomware. And
it's everywhere. You should, yeah.
Well, and I really feel like in our field there was sort of before ransomware and after ransomware. Like everything changed, and obviously it created a lot of opportunities for me and people in our space. You could finally get meetings with people because they read something in the newspaper and were scared, and it really, all the companies that thought security by obscurity would keep them safe realized that it wouldn't, and so it really opened up a ton of opportunities. But it also gets kind of boring, ransomware, ransomware investigations. But what I'm interested in, and this is really why I wanted to get into, more proactive work, is okay. Well, let's focus on making sure that doesn't happen again. And focusing on where I think most companies are underinvested, even the ones that have quote unquote mature security programs are under-resourced, underinvested in detection and the ability to detect. And I think, my business, I stole this from Bruce Schneier. I don't know whether he was the one who first said it, but prevention is ideal, but detection is a must, right? That
sounds like him, actually.
Yeah. I definitely stole it from him, but yeah, I never could figure out whether he was the first one to say it, but that's, our entire business is really premised on that. Attackers stay short and unproductive.
I think I said something like that a long time ago because everyone was saying, "Oh yeah, we got to prevent." And I remember there was a certain appliance manufacturer who said, "Hey, prevent it at the edge, and you don't need anything else." And I'm like, "Yeah, until you're beaten, and then what?" Right? And I said, there is, as long as we have an adaptive opponent who's going to find ways around what we're doing, you're going to have measures first to detect it and then to clean it out. So who knows who said it at this point, but yeah.
I won't name names. I just saw a billboard the other day that said "Stop breaches." You know, like, I don't think I would. You know,
so you can look at my resume and you'll see 22-ish plus years ago, I was at a company where marketing started to do that for endpoint security companies. They were like, "Stop," and it was absolute terms. It was called, rather than puffery.
Yeah.
And the FTC came down like a ton of bricks on the industry.
Yeah.
And you know, in some countries you literally can't do that. Like in Germany, you can't say it stops. You can't make absolute claims like that. Yeah. But you're not supposed to do it in the United States either. It's just it happens much more, and it seems like it's sliding that way again. Yeah. I don't like eliminates. I don't like stops or anything like that. I don't think any of us do in the industry.
Well, there's this weird thing that some technical folks that I think are very intelligent end up thinking that you should be able to prevent everything because you can detect everything. And the amount of pseudo arguments I've had on that conversation is staggering, especially because the reality of what we do, and I think I mentioned this on the last podcast we recorded, the reality of what we do is we provide a service to the business. And whether you like it or not, that's what you get paid for. And so we can't prevent everything because then you break the business.
Right.
And on top of that, technically, we can't prevent everything with accuracy, mostly because we would break the business. Like if you prevented everything that we could detect, most things are false positives still. No one wants to believe that's true. Everyone wants to believe we solved the false positive problem. And it's just not true. And I don't understand what it is around technical folks who are just like, well, if you can detect this, why can't you prevent it? Well, I don't know how to get through to you on this.
There's a number of conferences that I've been to over the years. And I remember I first presented at Black Hat like a long time ago. And there's always somebody who says, I have a new breakthrough, a new architectural breakthrough. And everyone goes, yeah, that's amazing. And everyone's excited. And then one person finds a corner case that breaks it and everyone gets totally depressed. Yeah. The fact of the matter is our job isn't to solve it. Right. It's to make a practical means of reducing the efficiency of an attack or reduce the risk, and to do so incrementally, right? Make incremental improvements. It's great if we find architectural breakthroughs, but they tend to be false hopes.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't tend to have a lasting effect when you have one big leap forward, because it will break things. And so I also teach, and I had some students who reviewed, and I'll say it, right? It was the Target case, and they said, hey, they turned off FireEye's auto detection. How arrogant was that? I said, I want everyone to think about why you would do that. When was it? And they were like, oh, it was November. I'm like, and what happens in November? Yeah. I want everyone, and they were like, and one person said, oh, that's, run up to Christmas. I said, yes, that's right. That's run up to Christmas. I said, what don't you want happening? And I said, would you believe 75% of most retail business is done in like a 2-week period? Yeah. And a false positive taking out one day could ruin the business. That's not arrogance. Yeah. It's a lockdown environment. There shouldn't, one false positive from a virus update or a behavioral detection with a 1% failure rate means that every 3 years you're going to lose a week.
Yep.
In those 2 weeks. No, that's not arrogance, people.
Yeah.
Right?
I dusted off this old talk that I gave probably 10 years ago for the first time, and I started using it again because I don't know, it just came back to mind that I start with the traditional equation for risk: threat times vulnerability times impact.
Yeah.
Okay, threat times vulnerability. So in cyber, and that applies in any area of risk, right? That's not specific to cybersecurity. But if you look at it from a cybersecurity perspective, obviously our goal is to reduce any one of those variables as close to zero as possible. If we can get any of them to zero, then we have zero risk, right? If you have zero vulnerabilities or zero threat or zero impact, your risk is zero. Now, the reality is we'll never do that, but we got to try to push them all down. There's not a heck of a lot you can do to reduce threats. It's sort of inherent to whatever business you're in. Don't say stupid. Can I swear?
You can swear. Stupid's not a swear.
Yeah, but no, I was going to say stupid shit. You shouldn't.
Just did. It's okay.
Don't say stupid shit on podcasts, right? That's how it's the threat to your organization.
Can we beep that out, Jacob? I don't know.
It's Jason's brand. It's his personal brand. It's up to him.
Resume rant. There we go.
Yeah. So yeah. There's not a lot we can do to reduce threat, other than don't do stupid things that draw, ire. Vulnerabilities. Oh boy, there's a lot we can do to reduce vulnerabilities. Anybody in our industry will be the first to tell you this and sell you something,
but never zero.
Not to zero. So that's kind of a losing battle, but that's where, and I've never seen firm statistics on this, but I would guess north of 80% of security spend goes into vulnerability reduction, right? Everything from, MFA to, antivirus, everything else.
Patching and everything else. Yeah.
Everything. So what gets squeezed out is impact, reducing impact. And that gets into there's a few reasons for that. It's not easy. It's not install this tool and it'll work in the background. It's hard to reduce impact because it's stuff like data minimization, data classification, access controls, don't have so many admin accounts, all these things, segmentation, network segmentation. We even use the term zero trust, which I will.
Or less trust, just settle for less trust.
Yes. So all these things that are hard. And of course, where I'm most interested is detection, right? That's where rapid detection and response reduces impact, right? And anyway, so I've dusted that off and started giving that talk again. It seems to be resonating with people, but that's, just back to your point.
The old ISC squared formulae. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. What's old is new again.
So in all this, what have you done to de-stress? I mean, so you don't have as many incidents waking up in the middle of the night. You used to be a drummer. What's fun? Yeah,
so music is still, a big part of my life. I don't play very much. I actually play more guitar than drums.
And your daughter plays guitar. You said you do that.
Yeah. So really, my daughter, who's 19, plays guitar and sings. But most importantly, what she can do that I could never really do is she can write a song. And actually, one of your other guests I listened to, was it John Dwyer? That was talking about
that was John.
Musician? Yeah, and he said, I realized that you can be a fantastic musician, but if you can't write good songs, you're just not going to make it, And I never kidded myself that I was going to make it as a musician. I knew it was a short-term thing. I had a lot of fun playing the drums. But my daughter, you could tell right away. I mean, she started writing songs at 13, 14 years old. And, she's talented. So she's 19. She's in a band with two other girls who are also, in their teens, early 20s. And they have a record contract. They're going on tour. They're selling out shows.
What are they called? We should at least give them some airtime. Yeah.
Shout out Hello Mary. That's what they're called.
Hello Mary. All right.
Hello Mary.
They were in Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone called them the next great New York rock band.
Love that.
Ooh.
I'm gonna add, and they're on Spotify and stuff. I can add.
Oh yeah, they're on Spotify. Their debut LP just came out in March.
We'll link them in the show notes too. I'm going to point down for the video people down. Go to the show notes.
Well, Jacob's going to put that in there.
Yeah. So it's great. And some people say, "Oh, you must be living vicariously through it." It's like, no, that's not. I'm not living vicariously at all because she's so much more talented than me. I don't want to be here, be her. But
you do want to be here. Do you just want to be her?
Yeah, I really don't want to be here. Freudian slip. But no, I mean, the pride that I get from watching her is far greater than what I would feel if I were doing it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's sort of parenting.
You mentioned earlier you didn't get her into cyber. Did you want her to get into cyber? Because my dad didn't want me to be in high tech. Like he wanted me he wanted me to be on the radio and to be a comedian, and I clearly.
Well, now you're on the radio, just the new version of it.
Way there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm counting on Jacob for this, but
and you have that iPhone joke from the beginning.
That's true. Actually, that really happened like 5 minutes before this. But did you want her to go into cyber? Did she ever show an inclination that way?
She had very little inclination. My son, I actually tried a little harder with my son because he's just he's an engineer. He has some more he's always been a math and science STEM kid. My daughter's always been more artistic and creative. And so, no, I didn't push her. I mean, I believe in, you expose your kids to a wide range of things. see what they like, number one, but also try to get a sense of what they're good at. I don't believe in encouraging your kids to do things they're not good at.
Yeah, you want them to be their best selves, right? Like that's
yeah. Oh. So and for her it was music, and I know I realize it's a long shot. I mean they're doing great. They're so young. They're getting attention. It's amazing.
So I just came up with a pet theory for you. I want to run this by you, and I'm building on something Bruce said. So. Yeah. Bruce said that there are systems out there and there are hackers for every system, right? He said this not that long ago, in fact. So like accountants know how to hack the tax system and lawyers know how to hack the legal system. And we know how to hack, or at least stop hacks in theory for the technology system. But I think musicians know how to hack the music system. And you just said you're not pretty good at hacking it, but your daughter is.
Yes.
Does that theory sound right to you? Or
I like it. I think it's right. But I think it's also she's just innately good. Like, she just has the right instincts.
Artists are therefore creatives, and creatives can be defined as hackers of a particular.
Yeah,
there you go.
I like it, Sam.
There's my new theory. There's Curry's theory number whatever.
Curry's
I shouldn't do that. That's really arrogant. Like we
well, if we put it as number one, as theory number one, then it doesn't seem as arrogant.
I got wackadoodle theories that will come out throughout the series, but yeah.
I like that. So I stay connected to current music through her. She has excellent taste in music that I do take some credit for.
So she finds emerging music and says, "Dad, this is in your wheelhouse."
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Her band is kind of a throwback. She's into, it's really sort of 90s inspired, 90s rock inspired guitar rock, which is not exactly what the kids are listening to. But it's what she's always loved. So I love, and I've always been into, quasi underground independent music, of various genres.
So I'm awful, by the way, at emerging music and stuff, but is it me, or is it the latest generation is either something is happening when things expire from a copyright perspective, or what goes around comes around? Because when I first heard Greta Van Fleet, if you've heard them, they sound like reincarnated, although they're not all dead, Led Zeppelin. Like they actually do.
They do. Yep.
Who, by the way, also ripped off a lot of people, etc. I got it, but there's a lot of styles that are coming back in this generation, and I don't know how much they were exposed to it.
I don't know if it's just this generation. I think it's actually technology makes it accessible. So if you go back and you look at record labels before the internet, basically you had to put in millions and millions in the marketing into getting the name out there and getting this accessible. So the record labels only picked the sliver of people that they thought could get out there, that they would make their return on investment on. And if you listen to Taylor Swift's story, I crib off of this all the time for the record industry. There's some really good stories on how she went through that process. I'm actually not a
huge Taylor Swift fan, by the way, and she stayed true to it, even though she's moved on to other stuff. She still loves it.
I'm not a fan, and I'm going to get so much criticism for saying that publicly, but
hate her.
I don't hate her. I think she's a talented artist and very brilliant from a business perspective. But anyways, that she speaks out against the record industry and about this all the time, about how it costs. And then some people go back and forth in this argument. If you listen to the music industry, they're like, well, it takes us $2 million of advertising to get you seen. But anyway, so since technology has proliferated, you can go and form a band of any genre and reach your audience and reach this. And you don't have to be a pop hit hitting millions and millions and millions, like 40 million listens. You could go get 1 million people that listen to you and you're still successful.
Right. Well, and actually, I thought you were going to go a different direction with technology.
What's your take?
The other thing that it does, I mean, you're absolutely right. I completely agree with what you just said. But the other thing it does, and let's give the algorithm some credit here. You may also like stuff. I found a lot of great music that way. And I tend to find, I'm starting with something old and I'm finding something new. But it goes the other way too. If you like this, you might love Led Zeppelin, right? And so I think I went to see a band a couple of weeks ago called Pigs, 7 Pigs. Out of the UK.
Just like the name. That's awesome.
And I
love that you just counted them, by the way, to find this out.
Well, I want to I respect the band. I want to get it right, but they're out of the UK, and they're like a reincarnation of Black Sabbath.
Love that.
I mean, just heavy, massive amplifier stacks. Like you feel it as much as you hear it. And of course I seek that stuff out. So, I don't want to jump to the conclusion that that's popular now, but but you do see it. And I think it is so technology. It allows for discovery as well as, I mean, when I was growing up in Binghamton, New York, we did not have a vibrant local music scene by any stretch. We'd go to the record store and buy records and listen to the radio. The Allman
That's
Brothers.
the northernmost Hampton. Yeah,
the northernmost Hampton. But honestly, for me, I remember this. I'll have to go back and look at the year. But Rolling Stone magazine put out an issue sometime in the mid '80s that was the top 100 records of all time. Okay, and I think number one was Sgt. Pepper. Right? Okay, well, I knew that one. But I think like 3 out of the top 5 I'd never heard. Number 2, I think, was the Sex Pistols. Never mind the Bullocks. I'd never heard of the Sex Pistols, let alone listen to that record. It was the Clash, London Calling.
Mm-hmm. That makes
I'd heard
sense.
the Clash. That was like during the combat rock Clash days, so I wasn't a huge fan of that. But London Calling and Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street. Again, I knew the Rolling Stones, but I didn't know that record. And I went to the record store. I bought all 3 of those. And honestly, like, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but that totally changed the trajectory of my sort of musical taste.
Wow.
Is that Rolling Stone? But that's how you had to do it, right? There's no algorithm.
So I have to share something, and then I'll get to a new theory. So back in the .com bubble, I was at McAfee.com, and I didn't understand product management worth a damn, because I was chief security architect for McAfee, and they said, "Hey, Sam, why don't you do this product management thing?" I said, "What's that?" And one of the things I had to do was figure out pricing. So I really looked into it, and Napster was big at the time. And I looked at it, and I'm like, why is the record industry fighting? And I don't know what Taylor Swift ever said about this, because I haven't read any of her stuff, but I've heard she has lots of commentary on the industry in general. But
Yes.
It occurred to me the real reason they hated Napster wasn't because it didn't sell records, because it did. More records sold, from my observation and looking at the numbers, than ever before because of Napster. It was the lack of predictability between what they were advertising and who they selected, as you put it, Jacob, and the results. So they could put money behind a band and it didn't do anything. And the bands they didn't back did very well. So it was a complete threat to the music industry. And so that's why they really went after Napster. And because it was the original sharing. And so the algorithms were doing it right then. The mavens were finding the music and they were spreading it. And people were then downloading what they liked, much more so than what was being pushed. And so now the new theory I'm going to come to, somebody we're going to have on as a guest in the future, Dan Miesler, he started talking about the availability, what essentially generative language models in ChatGPT are going to lead to. One of the consequences, if you read his blog, is finding talent generally in the creative spaces is going to change a lot. And I would say that this is actually where Napster was threatening to the music industry, and we're seeing threats now more generally to the music industry now that you just can't stop. These models are threatening to many more industries. Yeah. And so the fear, and here's my new pet, like theory number 2 of this podcast. It's not that generative language models are even AI or that they're going to take over the world, which is ridiculous, right? We're nowhere near that.
No.
It is instead that those who currently have power now aren't necessarily going to be able to maintain it. They're going to run into the same problem the music industry had previously. It becomes unpredictable. So of course we should put a pause on generative language models. There's my tin hat theory for everybody. And I'm waiting to hear the commentary on that one. So Jason, if you think I'm out to lunch, please tell me.
I don't. I saw one of in the prep materials, you guys asked are there any current topics that you want to talk about?
We have prep materials? Is that a thing?
And I was
I got a whole prep. I have a whole prep form that
Jason.
Sibel manages and gets everything sent out.
Sibel's awesome.
Yeah.
But one of the things I was going to say is one thing I don't want to talk about is generative.
I did it. I'm sorry.
But no. But only because I don't know what else to say. Like
I'm tired of the conversation
kind of
myself.
Shamefully obsessed with it. I think that's really what it is. Like I was using the OpenAI thing right when it opened up, whenever it was in November, and got totally obsessed with it. And I was a beta user of the Bing implementation of it.
It's a great tool.
I use it every day.
Yeah.
I use it every day.
Me too.
And I am both, very excited and horrified by it. But honestly, I think we just have to wait and see. And I think that's what you like. I can't. I don't know what else to. I don't know what to say about it that hasn't been said better by somebody else and by you just now.
I'll make one last comment, then I'm going to make us go back to interesting.
Then we'll go
topics.
back to you. Yeah.
Then we'll because we have one more thing that we should talk about, Jason. And Sam's got a good story on this topic too. But I will say I've been digging in a lot on the developer side of the underpinnings of what's happening with this. And there is so few people that actually know what's going on, and it can actually code just on top of not even create new algorithms, it's just like Bitcoin, how they're Bitcoin bros. I'm sorry if you're a Bitcoin bro, but like there's ChatGPT bros now, and it is driving me insane trying to find the real content of like, how do I implement this library and do this call with the API and then take that data and store it? So like trying to figure this stuff out. There's like 4 people doing it, and there's more than that. But
we're going to continue to need hackers for code. We're going to continue to need hackers
so anyways,
for music.
End of GPT. Let's talk about motorcycles.
Okay, but now that Canada's, I'll say one more thing.
All right, then motorcycles. Then it's motorcycle time.
Which is that I think the way, yes, motorcycles are next, everyone. So stay tuned. We're almost done with the AI.
I have a history there too, yeah.
But I think what we're interested in, at Ankura when it comes to AI is, helping, first ourselves and then others use it safely and effectively, yes, I guess, but mainly safely. And so developing an advisory practice around that. We're there's a lot of name an organization that isn't trying to figure out how to implement it. And if it's done badly, this could be just talk about risk. I mean, it's
just total waste of time.
Funnily enough, the attackers will keep this, I think, from relying on it too heavily. But
they are good for that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to ever say they're good, but yes, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So motorcycles. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have we usually do about an hour, Jason, which I say once we get towards the end, which we got about 10 minutes, 15 minutes of content that we can keep going to keep our hour limit. But yeah. So Jason,
you just broke
tell
the
us
fourth wall again. That is terrible.
Sorry. So yeah, tell us about how you got into motorcycles. Tell us about your journeys and your awesome trip. I think
you
did
still
last
ride.
year.
Is that a big thing?
I do. It has become a big thing for me again now that I'm empty nest. But I first got into motorcycles when I was very young in my teens. I think definitely before I had a driver's license. I had a 1979 Yamaha IT 175. And for
little
those
guy
of you out there who don't know motorcycles, that is like an early, still relatively early at the time, enduro motorcycle. So it had a headlight and a tail light.
I'll put a picture up in the video podcast. So if you're a video watcher, I'll put a picture right here for you. If you're not watching the video, I'll go watch the video.
It's still like my favorite motorcycle to look at of the ones that I've owned. So I had that and just tore around on it with my friends and loved it. And but then I went away to college and I didn't ride at all from so that's age 18 until I was in my early 30s. Because living in Brooklyn, what better place, to buy a motorcycle and start riding again.
Makes total sense. Yeah.
It makes total sense.
God, can you imagine riding across the Manhattan Bridge? Oh, no.
I don't have to imagine it. I may be doing it right after this podcast. I'm going to meet my daughter for dinner.
That's a grading bridge, isn't it?
No. Manhattan Bridge is
it the Brooklyn bridges?
There are parts of it that have none of the bridges are full steel deck.
Because the first one that I rode that was just pure grading, and I had this vision of me just sliding over a cheese grater, was between Cornwall, Ontario, and Messina, New York. And let me just tell you, the bike vibrates, and you realize it's just a horrible experience. I thought it was one of those, but please continue. Yeah.
I never get scared from that. I don't know why. There's something broken in my brain where that type of thing doesn't create fear in me, and I don't know why.
That is weird.
Yeah, I'm just oh, this is fun. My brain thinks it's fun.
Yeah, I do not like the steel bridge decks, and we do have a couple long ones in New York. And yeah, when it's windy and I'm on one of those, well, God.
Yeah, the wind though, that will get me.
But yeah, so I started riding again. I had a BMW F650 GS. That was sort of my first bike back into, and it's another sort of dual sport sort of, although that's a very road focused bike. But I wasn't riding it much. My kids were small. I felt guilty every time I went out on it. And so I sold it. And
my first bike was a 650. It was a Honda CX 650E, which was only available in Canada. Yeah,
man. Well, that's so the next bike I bought a couple of years later was a Kawasaki W650.
It's great. It's a great engine size. Yeah.
Oh man, it is. So I rode that around, but it's a nice city bike, but I really wanted to do more, sort of, because in New York City, like the time to ride is very early in the morning on the weekends, and you just jet out someplace out into the country. It takes you, somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour and a half to get to a cool place to ride. And so you want to have a motorcycle and go fast to get you, where you want to ride. And then, I like to go off road. So anyway, so I sold the Kawasaki, didn't have a motorcycle for another year or so, and then bought a BMW 1150 GS.
It's getting bigger.
And that really kind of changed. That's a large motorcycle, but it is unbelievably capable off-road, like that low center of gravity boxer engine. And that's what I started doing. I hate that it's called this, but I can't change it. It's called adventure motorcycling.
Ooh, that does sound a little Hardy Boys kind of thing.
Yeah,
nothing wrong with that, but
nothing. I like the Hardy Boys actually.
Me too.
Maybe there's a connection there. But anyway,
so investigations. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So you go. So I pack camping gear on this thing. Go out sometimes by myself, sometimes with friends, and we sort of ride, off on trails and abandoned roads that have been mapped. I mean, GPS has totally facilitated this rise in adventure motorcycles. You can get all these crazy maps from people, and actually New England, like Massachusetts, Vermont, huge up there. A lot of people do.
You got to let us know when you come up here because we can give you a base to stop at. But yeah,
that'd be awesome. Yeah. So my main ride, and I want to hear you guys talk about bikes, but my main ride, I do still have the BMW, but my main ride now is a KTM 790 Adventure R, which is like the perfect size. Bigger than the 650, but not quite as heavy and scary to ride in the woods by yourself as an 1150.
It's the perfect bowl of porridge. Yeah, it's right there.
Yes,
right in the middle.
Just right.
Yeah.
So, Jacob, do you still ride? Did you ride?
Oh yeah, all the time. I do one trip a year at least. That's a vacation trip where I take a week off and all I do is ride. And I usually do that with my dad. So my dad has been riding for a long time, and we got into riding together. When I got sometime between when I got out of college and now, my timeline is so difficult. But yeah, so I've gone through a bunch of different bikes. I've had a Ducati Scrambler, a KLR 650, which is like the industrial grade version of an adventure bike. Like you can just throw it off a cliff and it still runs somehow.
You can, man. Those things, I see a lot of those out in the woods, and they're tanks.
I could drop in the woods, etc. Right now, the bike I've been riding is a non-adventure bike, but I will still take it on Class 2 dirt roads and stuff, which is a BMW R1200 TR, whatever it is, whatever class it is. It's the big sport touring 1200 BMW.
Yeah.
And it's just such a blast to ride because it's
an RS, right? Isn't it an RS? No.
Yeah, maybe that's what it's not the RS designation. It's not. Okay. It's the RT. It's the touring, like
the RT, right. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll put a picture actually up here too, and I'll send a picture, Sam.
So you gotta find my old bike because I don't ride now, but if you find that one, it was a great bike. Mine had the bikini fairing. If you're looking for a picture,
I love bikini fairing bikes. That's so cool. I've been riding that bike now for a year or two, and it's just a blast. Like it goes everywhere I need. I can throw anyone on the back. I can put my girlfriend on the back, and it's comfy for her. I can do long touring on it, and it drives like a scooter for some reason. Like the BMW
you had me until scooter, man. I was like.
I love scooters. Scooters are one of my favorite things. I go to Florida sometimes for like a vacation. I rent a scooter instead of a car and just scoot around down there. I love scooters.
Not a Segway.
I use those Rebel scooters in New York City. I use those all the time.
I got the app. I love it. Yeah. All right. So Sam, you have a fantastic story.
So I'll tell you why I don't ride anymore. And you should never say this to people who ride bikes because then they're going to be like really.
No, we don't care.
You have to be okay with death to ride a bike.
So when I learned to ride, I learned in Ontario, and the Ontario Provincial Police did a whole lot of really cool like training. I did like the stunt riding, and I did the weekends with them. and I did like 3 of them, right? And I was really proud of my low speed maneuvers because I was told early on, like, if you're good at low speed maneuvers, you're going to be a good rider.
Totally right. That is absolutely correct. Yeah.
Very true.
And, you know, like, and I really wanted to be not just very safe, but very talented on the bike. And I was, but then I was working a lot. And, what happened is I had about 2 years where I didn't ride. And then I was visiting my brother in Massachusetts, the young one who I called an idiot earlier, by the way. So I should take that back.
Full circle.
And his girlfriend lent me her bike. And the 2 of us I got to back up a bit. So this was right when Phantom Menace came out. So you can like mentally imagine it. And I had secretly gone to see it with some friends in Canada. And I was actually interviewed by Radio Canada. If you can find the video for this, it'd be even funnier. But I did like a Chewbacca impression. But anyway, I didn't want my parents to know. That. I didn't want my parents to know because
that's a teaser for a future episode. You realize?
If you can find it, that's impressive. Was it 98 or something?
How much does a private investigator cost?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. So I didn't want my parents to know because it was a family thing. My other brother was born the night I went to go see Star Wars. So every time a movie had come out at that point, we'd gone to see it as a family. And my dad had tickets and I came home. And that's the reason I was at home. So my youngest brother, Ben, and I went out and we were riding and I took a very sharp 135-degree turn going uphill and hit some sand. And the bike kicked, and the bike, because it's hard to do when you're slowing down, going up, tight turn, hit some sand. The bike kicked out from under me and I slid under a truck going the other way.
Oh, no.
Now, the good news is no major
the bike or you without the bike?
Oh, I was on the bike.
Yeah,
so
going sideways.
Slid under oh God.
Yeah, and it dragged me, but the truck was slowing to a stop, so it's not as dramatic as it could have been. Ooh. And my brother behind me is able to cut the truck off so it didn't continue accelerating with me stuck under it. Good. So I hobbled away. We got the bike out. The bike was damaged. I was kind of in shock, right? Yeah. And so we got picked up. We didn't tell my dad what had happened.
Good move, probably.
Right?
Yeah.
So I went to the movies with him, which is just dumb because about maybe 15 to 20 minutes into I'm sorry, I didn't like Phantom Menace and I like Star Wars. Into an awful movie the second time where I'm pretending I haven't seen it, the pain hits me and my shoe's filling with blood. So at that point, I told my dad, hey, I was just in a motorcycle accident. Can we please go to the hospital? So we went to the hospital and in the triage, they say, what happened? And I said, I was in a motorcycle accident like 3 hours ago. And then I went to the movies. So the triage puts me over like the last person to go in. And by the time they took me in, I was out and they had to hook me up for like blood transfusion and stuff. Like my shoes were full. And so this has like become a horror story. But after that, it turns out I had a slipped disc, which is fine now, and a bunch of other stuff. But it was a nightmare, and so I don't ride bikes anymore, basically.
But it's such an example of like a typical male silliness to be like, I'm fine, my shoes are filling with blood. Like, it's so ridiculous the story that it becomes comical again. Like how ridiculous that is.
Well, the other lesson when I really thought about it is like if you're not riding a lot, it's sort of like any skill. Like if you're not doing cyber and forensics now, you're no longer the talented guy you used to be. If you're not riding the motorbike, it takes a while to get those. You may have spinal reflexes, but you're not an expert again. Like I should have seen that coming. I should have known, it's spring. Yeah. Maybe there's some sand on the road. Like this was not stuff that I should have forgotten. And I was good, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I never try to talk anybody into riding motorcycles.
I loved it. By the way, it was an amazing thing. I used to ride from Ottawa to Rochester, New York, because my dad did about a month of work there. He was a chip designer and he was working with Fujitsu. And it was great to just ride down and spend a couple of days with him and then ride back. And that's a 4.5 hour ride through the White Mountains is amazing.
That's beautiful.
So aside from the fact that you get covered in bugs and
I have a great
those huge bugs that hit you on the shore of a large lake that hit your mask.
I have a great photo of that where I'll consider putting it up, but it's these glasses I was wearing in the Florida, which parks down there to the national park. Everglades. Thank you. Wow, my brain's done for the day. I was going through the Everglades at night on a scooter, And I had to stop like every 5 minutes because my face was completely coated. And these glasses, I was wearing these glasses because I created them completely. I had to squeegee the bugs off and then like ride for 5 minutes.
You just reminded me, the other thing that happens is when it's raining on the bike that I had, because you'd sit upright, that I'd have my leather jacket on my cow on, right? But essentially the rain would hit you and then it would pool about 4 or 5 inches deep in between your legs and the bike. And so you'd have this like cold lake and it was awful. So, but that was part of the experience, right? And still is for you, Jason.
It is. It
still is for you.
I think gear though goes a long way.
It goes so far.
Yeah. I really like that stuff.
I think it's probably a good place for us to call this an episode.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. This is
Jason,
great.
I hope you enjoyed this because it
was awesome, guys. Yeah, no, I really did enjoy it. And, I know I talked to Kevin Noble about doing this. You guys should have him on, or maybe have us come together. We'll
have you both on sometime. Yeah.
We'd love to do that. Yeah.
Because we've known each other a long time. So that would be fun. But no, this is great.